Welcome to Hurt at Work, a Kentucky workers' comp podcast. Today, Louisville workers' compensation attorney Scott Scheynost is going to provide helpful information, tips, and advice for injured workers and their families. Scott's goal is to help you to maximize the benefits you receive. If working's got you hurting, sit back and listen to Scott address topics that matter to you. Welcome to Hurt at Work, a Kentucky workers' comp podcast. Today is episode number 4 with Louisville attorney Scott Scheynost. Scott has a workers' compensation practice here in Louisville, and he branches out to most of the state, if not all the state, over the last 20 years or so. And we're going to continue different conversations. Today, the topic is 5 reasons you need a workers' comp lawyer. And we've had a number of episodes already where we're talking about various facets of workers' compensation benefits and filing a claim and why you need to do that. But if you're going to go down that road, you probably need to have somebody that's experienced in this arena alongside with you. And it's not something you want to do on your own necessarily. And we're going to kind of break that down into 5 different reasons. And let's go ahead and jump in. Hey, Scott, welcome. I appreciate you coming back.
Glad to be here again. Yes,
absolutely. I know you're awful busy these days. Let's jump into the first reason. And that's really something that I think a lot of people don't understand here in Kentucky. And that's the choice of medical treatment.
Right. You got to remember workers' comp is not a friendly system. You're swimming with the sharks when you have a workers' comp claim. The workers' comp carrier, the employer, third-party administrator, whoever's dealing on the other side, their main objective is not to make you better. Their main objective is to save money. So there's a lot of different ways they can do that. One of the biggest ways they can do that is to direct your medical treatment, which they're not really allowed to do in Kentucky. They are in other states, but they're not in Kentucky. A lot of times folks will tell me that their boss, their employer, their supervisor told them they had to go to their doctor. That's wrong. In the state of Kentucky, we are a choice of physician state for workers' compensation claims. And that means you get to pick the doctor that you want to go to for medical treatment. Sometimes there's some things that limit that. Sometimes you don't have as many choices as far as the doctors that you can go to. But in Kentucky, your employer cannot tell you what doctor to go to for medical treatment. You get to pick your doctor.
And Scott, in episode 3, you talked a little bit about what the incentive for the company is to have a doctor that kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Here's what I'm going to tell you your injuries are and how bad they are.
Right. There's a reason the company is sending you to a specific doctor, and it's not generally to make you better. The reason is it contains their cost. The reason is that they aren't going to spend as much money on your case. So they're actually trying to save money on your case from the very beginning when they direct your medical treatment. And that can come up in a lot of different ways. Different doctors will order different sets of tests at different times, or order different procedures. In a workers' compensation setting, when you have a permanent injury, you will get an impairment rating, which has a big factor in how much money you get. Certain doctors give lower impairment ratings than other doctors. The insurance company, the employer, they know who these doctors are. Before you're ever injured, they know what doctors they want you to go to minimize their costs. And again, that's not really to make you better. That's so they can save money. There's somebody looking at a dollar sign at the end of your claim. That dollar sign doesn't include whether or not you're feeling better. That dollar sign doesn't include how you feel about the whole process. That dollar sign is how much money they paid on your case. And they want that dollar sign to be as small as possible.
And in all reality, though, it's not that the doctor's lying. It's just there's sometimes a spectrum of opinion. And if it can go either way, they're probably going to go make the call toward the benefit of the company because they know that company is going to continue to refer patients back to them. And that is beneficial for the doctor.
Yeah, doctors are like any professional. They all have different opinions. Some of them are more opinionated one way than another regarding certain things.
Right.
But the doctors that the company send you to generally will not want to have you go through significant medical treatment as soon as somebody like your family doctor would. And that's really the best advice somebody can give you about a workers' compensation claim is to pick your own doctor. Go to your family doctor. If your family doctor doesn't do workers' comp or doesn't do that specific injury, ask them who they would go to if they were injured. What doctor would they see? But when the company is telling you to go to a specific doctor, there's a reason. They're trying to save money on your case from the very beginning. And if you don't have an attorney involved in it, you might be having difficulties getting to your own doctor. There are some specific rules. If your company has what's called a managed care plan about how this is done, a managed care plan is like an HMO for workers' comp claims. That's not very common, but it is out there. You run into that. But I'm amazed at how many people tell me their company said they had to go to this doctor. They didn't have a choice about it, and they were breaking the law if they went somewhere else. And I don't know if they're just being lied to, or if the company doesn't understand it, or the company's just not doing the research they need to do, or if they've just been told this by somebody else. But I hear that frequently, probably more times than not, from people I deal with that have been injured. And a lot of times they don't even believe me. I have them call the Kentucky state government to confirm what I'm saying, because they've been told this by their foreman. They've been told this by the person in HR. They've been told this by the claims adjuster.
Got to be true.
Got to be true.
Yep.
But it's not always true.
Well, and the other issue comes down to getting the right medical testing, the right surgeries.
Correct.
I mean, there are ways to treat this, but there are surgeries and treatments that may work better for this particular situation, and that may involve more money or extended time off and things like that. And again, the company may not necessarily want to go down that road.
Right. The typical workers' compensation claim is somebody's hurt their back. You hurt your back, you go to the doctor. What they're usually going to do is look at you, and they're going to order physical therapy. If that doesn't work, then they're going to give you a steroid injection. If that doesn't work, then they're going to order MRI to see what's going on. You're going to find out that if you went to your family doctor, they'll do 2 weeks of physical therapy. If that doesn't help, they'll order the steroid injection. And if that doesn't help, by the end of the month, you'll have the MRI. If you go to the company doctor, it might be 6 months before they're done with physical therapy.
And that affects your quality of life outside of everything. That affects your ability to heal properly.
That hurts you. That hurts you. You're hurting during this time too.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, how much you hurt's not on that dollar sign that the company is looking at the end of your case, but you're hurting. You're not able to go to the kids' soccer game. You're not able to go to the baseball game. The spouse is doing all the work around the house, and they're not appreciating that. Yeah. You're having to put up with this. You're the one that's going through all this stuff. And again, what the company sometimes, I think, is hoping is that you forget about it. You give up on it. You turn it into your regular health insurance because you don't want to deal with them. Yeah. There's a lot of incentives. If you get run over by a car in another accident, and it's taken them 9 months to do this, they've actually saved money because they didn't do all the testing that they could have done otherwise. So the company has a lot of incentives to delay treatment. The doctors they send you to generally want to make the company happy, and they understand this. My experience has been is if you go to your family doctor, they're not in this to make the company happy. They're not in this to make me happy. They're in this to make you better. Most family doctors are practicing medicine because they believe it's a calling. They want to do what they can to help you. They have your best interest at heart. And I think that's the best piece of advice I can give you is to go to somebody other than the company doctor, especially a family doctor, to get treated for this. And again, if you don't have an attorney involved in this, you're going to find this could be difficult. Sometimes the company will tell you can pick who you go to, but my experience is most of the time they're not going to. And this can be uncomfortable, and you might need some direction and help in doing that.
Well, let's transition to the second of the 5 reasons you need a workers' compensation lawyer. And that has to do with getting immediate benefits.
Right. If you're hurt at work and you're not able to work, there's some requirements that you got to be off work for at least a week. But once those have been met, then your company owes you a thing called temporary total disability benefits. And we call that TTD in workers' compensation. That's 2/3 of your average weekly wage with a maximum, I think, of $9.79 for 2020 injuries. So they owe you that money. Now, most people aren't maxed out. Most people aren't reaching the maximum. Most people, are making $10, $15 an hour. If you're making $15 an hour, you're working 40 hours a week. Well, that's $600 a week, so you get 2/3 of that, which is $400. But what I found out, most hourly people are also working overtime. Sometimes they're getting bonuses. The workers' comp carrier has to do a lot of math to figure out exactly what your average weekly wage is. They're supposed to look at your wages for every week in the 52 weeks before the injury, look at those and determine if you were making overtime. They got to go through some complex computations for that. And what they do is they divide it up into 4 quarters, and you get the best quarter for your average weekly wage. So if you're working overtime, especially if you're working overtime during the busy season, for instance, if you're in retail sales and that's Christmas, if you're in the soda business and that's around summertime when everybody's selling a lot more sodas, you're going to have a higher weekly wage during those periods. What I find out is the workers' comp carriers, the adjusters and the people that determine your average weekly wage don't like to do the math. They're just like me. They don't want to go through all these calculations. They want to do the hourly rate times the hours they think you work 40 hours a week. So if you're getting overtime, if you've got a busy season, if you're getting bonuses, if you're getting piecework, if you're getting any of those things, those usually, my experience is, aren't calculated in your average weekly wage.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things that you talked about extensively in episode 3 had to deal with other sources of income, other side jobs or second jobs that you may have. That also goes into that. And the company sure as heck doesn't necessarily want to remind you of that.
That's right. That's another thing in Kentucky with somebody's injured at work. we not only look at your wages for the job in which you were injured, but we also look at the job that is your concurrent employment. If you've got a second job, we'll look at that. There's a couple of requirements for that second job to be calculated in your average weekly wage. One is it has to be a job that workers' compensation benefits would apply to. For instance, if you're an independent contractor or you've got a side business, you don't pay yourself an average weekly wage, then that's probably not going to be computed in it. Another requirement is that your employer know about the second job. You told a foreman that you had to leave early to go to this job. You couldn't do overtime that week because of this other job. You just told the boss, hey, man, I got this other job where I'm, working down as an usher down at the Yum Center. So if you've got this second job and the employer knows about it, and the second job would also qualify for workers' compensation benefits, that gets added into your average weekly wage. Sometimes people don't know that. A lot of times a workers' comp carrier doesn't ask you that. But if you got a second job, we're trying to get you as much money as we can. That will help you get some more money.
And as the employee, you may want to document. You may want to write down a note, give it to your supervisor, so that there is documented proof that, no, you knew I had a second job.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to document all this stuff. I think most people aren't planning on having a workers' compensation claim, but when they go back and they think about it, they've either told their boss has had to work around their schedule, they've had a friend that heard them tell their boss this. I've yet to have somebody actually documented the fact they had a second job, which would be great. But there's usually another way we can prove that.
Let me ask you a quick question. If I'm working in a plant somewhere and I tell my union steward, is that a company representative or do I need to tell?
No, union stewards are not really management employees normally. I mean, they could be, but most of the time they're not going to be. You've got to tell a foreman, a supervisor, a manager, somebody in human relations, the president, the boss, somebody above you, not just a fellow employee, but somebody that's your supervisor. And that's the notice to the employer that you're in this second job.
Yeah. And part of these immediate benefits also have to do with related benefits. So there are other options beyond just this temporary total disability, this TTD calculation.
Right. Your average weekly wage is another factor we look at to determine how much money you get for a permanent disability. It's actually a very important factor. And the more or the higher you can make that average weekly wage, the more money you're also going to get for that. So not only does it have a bearing on how much money you get while you're off work, it also has a bearing on how much money you will eventually get because you have a permanent disability. So you need to make sure your average weekly wage is correctly computed. And again, this is a very complex formula. Most workers' comp adjusters would rather not even look at it because it takes a while to do it. We set it up in our office where we've got Excel spreadsheets, and I've got some staff that will be able to take the numbers and we just plug those in there, and we can figure out what your average weekly wage is relatively fast once we have the information.
Well, and this is kind of a sidebar, but at the end of episode 3, we talked about this. You may have additional claims out there. You may have a Social Security disability claim. You may have an auto accident claim if you were driving for work when you got injured. I mean, in a good attorney, Scott, I've seen you do this where you'll actually let the client know, hey, look, there are some other sources of income and other things we might want to do along the way to make sure that we're maximizing that income and that income replacement while you're hurt.
Correct. Yeah. If you sit down and talk to us, and we'll try to figure out what we can do to make you better as far as your damages. And if there's a third-party claim because of a motor vehicle accident, if you're not able to work in any job, you might have a Social Security disability insurance claim. There may be some other sources available for you, and usually we'll look at all those things and try to figure those things out for you. If it's something that we don't do, then we'll try to refer you to somebody else. But a lot of times it's fairly common for somebody, especially older workers, come in and say they got hurt and they can't work any longer. Well, not only do you have a workers' comp claim, but you also have a Social Security disability insurance claim. Right. A lot of that depends on your age, and the neat thing about Social Security disability is they'll look at other factors other than just the work-related injury. Yep. If you just hurt your hand, then we just may have a small claim in the workers' comp claim, but that may be something that adds up when you add heart problems to it, or you've had a back injury before, or other things that happen during your life. Social Security considers all those things, and workers' comp, we're generally just going to look at what happened at work.
Right, what happened at the time of the accident or the incident. Right.
And then there's motor vehicle accidents. We've talked about that a couple times. It might be out there. If you're a truck driver and get hurt at work, well, you have a workers' comp claim, but you also may have an accident claim against a third party, products liability. If you're operating a piece of machinery and it's defective, there should have been a guard, it blows up, you may have an action against the people who made the machine. So we'll try to go through all that and try to figure out if you have any of those claims. They all have varying statutes of limitation, which is a requirement that you file them within different times. In workers' comp, you can do it within 2 years from the date of the injury or 2 years from the date you last received temporary total disability. Some of them only have 1 year in Kentucky. So You don't want to sit around and wait. So I would talk to somebody about this sooner as opposed to later, and I wouldn't wait till the day before the 1 year expired, because there's probably not any way they can help you if that applies.
Yeah, be proactive.
Correct.
So reason number 3, really, again, we're going back talking about the 5 reasons you need a workers' compensation attorney, is establishing the true case value. And that's something, again, the insurance adjuster is kind of going to downplay that. The company doc's going to downplay that, but there are other factors.
Yeah, this average weekly wage we were talking about before is a big factor in there, and that determines how much money you get for TTD, but it also determines how much money you get for the permanent disability. And that's usually what people are talking about with how much is my casework? How much am I going to get for this permanent disability? And the answer to that is, well, there's a formula. And you would think with an attorney you don't need somebody to plug in all the numbers of the formula, but there's 5 factors: impairment ratings, average weekly wage, whether or not you go back to work at your old job, your age, and your education. I have literally argued over all 5 factors that are used in this formula. Again, I've had people that were born outside the United States where we couldn't determine their true age. You actually get more money in a workers' compensation claim. The older you are, it's harder for you to find a job. So that makes sense. I've argued also about how much education somebody's had. Again, somebody from another country, they may go through only 6 grades of education. That's considered, complete schooling, high school for them. It's not here in the United States. The less education you have, the more money you get, again in workers' compensation, because it's harder for you to find a job.
Yep.
So there's 5 factors in the formula, but we can do things to argue about all 5 of those factors. The 2 common ones we argue about in a workers' compensation claim setting are the impairment rating, because that's a big factor, and also whether or not you can go back to work. The easiest one to argue about is return to work. The employer always thinks you can return to work. You get more money if you can't return to work. I've yet to see an employer voluntarily agree that you can't return to work. Yeah, you had to lift 100 pounds, and now you can only lift 5. Well, you can come back here, and we'll find something for you.
Find
sure.
something.
Yeah. So we argue about that a lot. But the other one is the impairment rating. And the impairment rating is actually fairly complicated. There's a book that tells the doctors how to determine an impairment rating. Unfortunately, in this book, there's a lot of room for latitude. For instance, for a specific injury to your arm, there might be 5 or 6 different ways to determine that impairment rating: range of motion, loss of grip strength for your hand, pain, specific procedures, for instance, to your rotator cuff, or impairment ratings. And I've seen a lot of discretion in different doctors and how they do range of motion. That's measuring how high you can move your arm, how far you can move it, things like that. I've seen different doctors with the same person with the same injury have different computations for range of motion. Generally, the doctor the company sends you to is going to have a lot better computations. They're going to find that you have a better range of motion than other doctors because your impairment rating would be less. So there's a lot of room for variables in this impairment rating, how you determine that. And that's frequently something that comes up. You have to know a little bit about the book the doctors use. You have to know a lot about the doctors, because different doctors, if you do this long enough, you almost know what the impairment rating is going to be before you're even sent to them. So there's a lot of things that come into play in determining the value of the case. We've got to figure out all 5 of these factors. We can argue about all 5 of them. Another thing that a lot of people don't like to hear, but it's true, is we've got to wait till you've reached maximum medical improvement before we can do all these computations. You've got to go through your medical treatment. Hopefully you're being treated, and that's going to make you better. And if you get better, then some of these things are going to be less. So you've got to finish your medical treatment before we can figure out what your case is actually worth as far as permanent disability and workers' comp. It's a little bit different in the setting of a car accident or some other third-party lawsuit, because a lot of times we'll make estimates about that right now, and they'll go ahead and say, well, they're going to have this treatment, this is going to happen, we're going to go ahead and base this on that. In workers' comp, if you're going through medical treatment, you're supposed to be getting money for being off work. So what we do in workers' comp is we put your case on hold until you get done with all that medical treatment. And that can take 6 weeks, that can take 6 years sometimes. So you have to get done with the treatment, you have to get done with the surgeries, you have to recover from it, you've got to go through therapy, you've got to go through all that treatment. The doctors have got to say, I'm done with you. There's not anything else I can really do for you to make this any better. At that point, you reach maximum medical improvement, the money you're getting for being off work stops, and then we argue about all those things I just talked about in that factor.
But again, to save somebody out there a heart attack who just heard you say this could take 6 years, theoretically, you're still getting that TTD payment along the way.
That's the exception to the rule of case that lasts that long. I've had some cases that last that long, but you normally don't.
What if you've got extensive back surgeries, you've got reconstructive surgeries?
Yeah.
I mean, some of these injuries are catastrophic in nature,
right?
And you just don't know until you reach that point.
Essentially, the worse the injury is, probably the longer it's going to take to recover from it. And somebody that's had a broken arm that's set and it's okay in 6 weeks, well, that one's pretty fast. Let's say that I've had this happen, parts of your arm are torn off and reattached, and they've taken other body parts out and put those in where places you didn't think they could do it. Yeah. And all this has got to heal, and the nerves have got to regenerate, which don't happen overnight. And you got to go through physical therapy for a while, and this can take a significant amount of time. Well, you've got to wait till all that's over with to figure out what your case is worth, because you've not reached maximum medical improvement until you've really completed your medical treatment. And some people, have bad injuries. Sometimes it takes a while to go through all that.
But that's about the only way you can get to the true value of this case is to reach those points.
So sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah.
Other cases, we can see where it's going pretty fast. We may still have to wait to make sure, but some of these cases, if you've done it long enough, you almost know where it's going to go. But still, you have to wait. Things can happen later on. Conditions can get worse. Other things can go on.
Well, let's move on then to point number 4 of the 5 reasons you need a workers' compensation attorney, and that's negotiating with the workers' compensation adjuster. And this is the guy that's on the other side,
right,
trying to figure out how much you're getting paid or going to get paid.
Right. Not only, regarding these immediate benefits for temporary total disability benefits and money for reimbursing expenses, usually what happens is if you have a permanent disability, you're going to get an impairment rating, and we're going to argue about all those 5 things I just talked about, just to figure out how much the monetary benefits are worth. Now, we can argue about that stuff and we can come up with some numbers, but there's still a couple other things that have to be done in your claim. In Kentucky, in addition to those monetary benefits for being off work, you're entitled to a couple other things. One of those is medical treatment for the rest of your life. Another thing is a right to reopen your claim within a window of 4 years after you settled it. And another thing is called vocational rehabilitation. So in addition to the money, you've got these 3 other rights. Why are those important? Well, if you want medical treatment for the rest of your life, you got it if you preserve it. Insurance companies, though, like to wrap up cases. They like to get you to waive those medical expenses. And they'll give you a little bit of money for that. But probably the biggest thing they use to get you to waive those medical expenses is they won't settle your case for what's called a lump sum unless you agree to waive medical expenses.
Right.
In Kentucky, when you get money for your claim, the bad news is they're only required to pay that in weekly benefits. If you go before a judge and he orders them to pay you your benefits, he can only order that they pay you those benefits weekly. I've yet to have a client that would not want the money all at once as opposed to weekly. I wouldn't. I don't see any reason why you would want to get weekly. But that's the law in Kentucky. I can't change the law. I can't force a judge to order anything else. But my clients want that money all at once. The insurance adjuster knows they want the money all at once. So what happens is we get into a negotiating process. How much are your medicals worth? Well, that really depends on what you're going through. I've got one case right now where medicals are worth over millions of dollars. I've got other people that have had a small injury with a broken arm, and the medicals may not be worth anything. So, your medicals are really worth what your future treatment is. We have to do certain things sometimes to figure out what that is. That doesn't necessarily mean the insurance company is going to pay you what it's worth. But that's one of the ways we use to resolve a claim to get a lump sum is we'll talk about waiving medicals. Same thing with right to reopen. You've got a 4-year window to reopen your claim if your condition worsens to get more money. If you've got an injury that doesn't look like it's going to have any other problems, it may not be a bad idea to reopen. It's a gamble. We'll talk about whether or not it's a good gamble or not. Most people, I think, know whether or not they're going to have more treatment down the road. You can just see it. If they're not having a good result right now, they're complaining about what's going on. That's probably not a good idea to waive the right to reopen or waive the right to medical expenses because there's going to be some other stuff happening.
And we're kind of drifting into number 5 here, the preserving of your benefits, the preservation of your benefits. But again, this is why you're there. I mean, this is a complicated system.
Right.
And to wade in by yourself, and in these let's be perfectly honest, these adjusters negotiate every day for a living. That's what they get paid to do.
If they don't, they've got somebody telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And again, they probably got 300 cases and may have been doing this for 30 years. So, I've been doing this for probably 30 years too. But the main thing here is you've never done this before. They do this every day. Time is on their side. There are certain things that you can and can't do to get these benefits increased. If you get a doctor that says you need more medical treatment, well, that's going to help you get more medical if you want to waive it. There's another thing we really haven't talked about, that's vocational rehabilitation. If you're a good candidate for it, if you go out and go to schools and try to find out what it's going to cost to learn a certain craft or program, we can use those materials and argue with the insurance company that you're going to have vocational rehabilitation, and they may want to pay you to waive that. There are certain things that we can do to negotiate your claim with a workers' compensation carrier. They will generally send you to a doctor that's going to give you a low impairment rating. If that happens, we've got other doctors that we can use to rebut that impairment rating. So when you're trying to preserve your benefits, you got to know what your benefits are. You got to know that you've got all these things available to you. You have to have a decent idea about what they're worth. And then you have to have a decent idea about how the process goes. What I see a lot of times is the insurance company will send a letter out saying, here's $10,000. Sign this and we'll give you $10,000. Sometimes that's a good deal. A lot of times it's not. There's a reason the insurance company is offering you $10,000.
Just like a car wreck claim.
Yeah. If they're offering you $10,000, well, it's probably worth more than that. Generally, I think we can get more value for the cases if we get involved in it. We do have to charge a fee, but generally when we get involved in the case, I think we're paying for ourselves. People are getting more money, even after my fees considered. They're also getting either better benefits or longer benefits than they talked about before. When you get that letter with a number, there's a reason that insurance companies send you that number.
Yeah.
Occasionally, that's the right number. I've seen adjusters actually do the right thing, compute the case correctly, not ask you to waive anything. More commonly, what I see is a number that pays you $500 to waive your medicals, right to reopen, vocational rehabilitation. That could be worth $50,000 or $60,000. Could be worth $500 too. It's different in every case, but generally they're not going to make an offer to settle your case unless it's beneficial for the insurance company. They think somehow they're saving money by doing this. It doesn't hurt to talk to me or some other attorney. We're happy to sit down. We generally handle these on what's called a contingency fee. We're not going to charge you anything unless we can help you. If I think I can help you with that kind of an offer, I'm going to tell you that. If I don't think I can, I'm going to try to be honest with you about that too. But it doesn't hurt to call us.
Absolutely. So just a brief recap of the 5 reasons that you really need a workers' comp attorney is that your choice of medical treatment, you get immediate benefits underway, establishing the true value of your case, being able to negotiate effectively with the workers' comp adjuster, and then the preservation of your benefits. And Scott, you've done this for 20 years or more, and you really have a good handle on this. You've worked with a lot of these adjusters, you've worked with all these companies, and you kind of know the lay of the land. I think if I'm injured, not only am I worried about the fact that I'm hurt and I'm worried about bills and everything else, I don't have time to take all this into consideration and put together a game plan. You do this every day.
We do this every day, several times a day. Yep. And I enjoy doing it. I hope if you have any questions about this, you don't hesitate to call us. I think we're pretty approachable. We've got a telephone number. You can call us, 502-937-5287. We're happy to talk to you. We try to get back with the folks as soon as possible. You'll generally end up talking to me. You may end up talking to my staff at the beginning. They may take some information, but I'll generally call you back, and you'll actually be able to say you talked to an attorney when you call my office. But we enjoy doing this. I like helping folks. If you've got any questions about any of these issues, feel free to give us a buzz, and we'll try to help you out as much as we can.
And just to avoid confusion, my name is Jim Ray. I'm a non-attorney spokesperson. I'm just helping Scott out with the show. He is the attorney. He's the one you want to ask for when you call the office. But you can also check out his website for more information. Scott's got a very well built out website with a lot of information out there, and you can find that online at www.scheynost.com. That's SCHEYNOST law.com. Scott Scheynost at ScheynostLaw.com. Scott, that's a wrap for episode 4, buddy. I appreciate your time.
I like it every time. Thank you.
Here we go. Thanks for listening to this episode of Hurt at Work. Scott will be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. For more information, be sure to visit ScheynostLaw.com. That's SCHEYNOST law.com. You can also follow Scott's Workers' Comp office on Facebook. Until next time, be safe and remember, Scott's ready to help, especially when you and your family need it the most.